Okay, let's dive in. Today, we're tackling something I think we've all dealt with. Project delays. I mean, they're practically a fact of life, right?
Oh, absolutely. It never fails, does it?
No, it really doesn't. And it's funny, we found this study that says professionals spend, get this, an average of 2.5 hours every week just talking about timeline changes.
2.5 hours. Wow.
Yeah, that's like a whole side gig just dealing with delays. But here's where things get interesting. What if, instead of dreading these conversations, we saw them as, I don't know, like a chance to really shine?
I like where you're going with this.
Yeah. So that's what we're going to unpack today. Reframing delays, not as these career-ending disasters, but as opportunities. Opportunities to show leadership, strategic thinking, all that good stuff. Sound good?
Sounds great to me. Let's do it.
Perfect. So first things first, where do we even begin?
Well, I think the best place to start is with understanding who we're talking to. You've got your senior stakeholders, your team members, your client.
The whole mix.
Yeah, and each of those groups is going to have different concerns, different priorities when a delay pops up.
So we can't just blast out a generic, hey, we're delayed email and call it a day.
Definitely not. That's a recipe for disaster, or at least a lot of unnecessary stress. For example, let's say you have to announce a delay in a software launch. Now, your senior stakeholders, they're probably thinking big picture, right? Budget, market share, the whole strategy.
Makes sense.
But then you have your team. They're the ones actually doing the work, so they need the nitty-gritty. How's this impacting their day-to-day? What deadlines are shifting?
Right. The practical stuff.
Exactly. And then, of course, you've got your clients. They just want to know if they're still getting what they need and when.
So it's really about understanding the audience and tailoring your message accordingly.
You got it.
Speaking of tailoring the message, our research mentions this project manager, Maria. She had this 3-week delay on a software launch, and you know what she did.
What'd she do?
Instead of freaking out, she sat down and mapped out exactly how the delay would impact each group. But then she went a step further.
Oh.
Yeah, she actually identified what opportunities the delay created.
Wow. Now that's thinking ahead.
Right. Didn't shy away from the bad news, but she presented it in a way that showed she had a plan. I bet that impressed her stakeholders.
I bet it did. Turning a potential disaster into a display of strategic thinking. That's impressive.
Definitely. Okay, so we've got stakeholder management, but what about the timing of the announcement itself? When's the right time to actually break the bad news?
Well, that's a bit of a balancing act, isn't it? Announce too early, and you might create unnecessary panic, but wait too long, and you risk damaging trust.
So how do you find that sweet spot?
I'd say the best time to announce is when you have enough information to present the challenge. Yeah, but also at least the beginnings of a solution.
So transparency, but also preparedness. Makes sense. Now, how do cultural differences factor into all this? Do we need to, adjust our approach based on who we're communicating with globally?
100%. I mean, even something as simple as when you announce a delay can have cultural implications. Like our research mentioned that in Japan, they often prefer these sorts of conversations later in the afternoon.
Oh, that's interesting. Why is that?
Well, the thinking is it gives everyone time to digest the information and come back the next day with a clear head and thoughtful responses.
I can see how that would show respect for everyone's time, too.
Exactly. It's not just about what you say, but how and when you say it.
Right. And then you've got cultures like in Germany where they really value directness. So they're going to expect detailed explanations about what caused the delay, what the solutions are, exact timelines, the whole 9 yards.
Well, yeah, for sure. And the more global your work is, the more you need to be aware of these nuances. The most successful global managers are really good at what's called cultural code switching. It's almost like speaking different languages, but instead of words, it's about understanding different cultural expectations.
That's a powerful skill to have, especially these days.
It really is. But no matter what culture you're dealing with, one phrase I find works wonders is, I value your perspective on this timeline adjustment.
Oh, I like that.
It shows respect, right? It shows you're approaching it as a shared challenge.
Definitely. It's not about pointing fingers. It's about working together. Now, I want to get into the specifics of how we actually talk about these delays. The research mentions this concept of power vocabulary, which sounds pretty intriguing.
Oh yeah, power vocabulary. It's all about how even small changes to the words we use can make a huge difference in how a delay is perceived.
Okay, so spill the secrets. Give me some examples.
All right, so instead of saying we're delayed, try phrases like we're recalibrating, we're optimizing, or we're realigning. You see the difference?
Oh yeah, those definitely sound more, I don't know, proactive. maybe? Like you're taking control of the situation instead of letting it control you?
Exactly. It's about framing the delay as a deliberate adjustment, not just a setback.
I like that. So it's all about the spin.
Well, it's more than just spin. It's about using language that reflects a strategic, forward-thinking approach.
Right, right. It's about owning the situation. So what else? What other power words can we sprinkle in?
Okay, here's another one. Let's say you have to explain a 2-week delay. Now, instead of saying a delay of 2 weeks, try saying a 2-week optimization period.
Ooh, optimization period. I like that. Sounds so much more intentional.
Right. It's like
Right.
you're using that time to make improvements, not just sitting around twiddling your thumbs.
Exactly. Okay, I'm sold. Power vocabulary it is.
Another key ingredient to power vocabulary is future-focused language. Instead of dwelling on what's already happened, highlight the positive outcomes that will result from the delay.
So instead of we missed the deadline, this allows us to deliver an even better product.
Nailed it. And research backs this up, by the way. Studies show that this kind of future-focused language really boosts stakeholder confidence.
Makes sense. It's about shifting the focus from what went wrong to what's going right.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about stakeholder management, timing, cultural considerations, and the power of language. What's next on the agenda?
Well, I think it's time to move from reactive to proactive communication. You know how they say the best defense is a good offense?
Yeah.
Same goes for timeline management. Ideally, we want to communicate about potential delays before they become actual problems.
So like having a crystal ball and predicting the future.
Well, not quite a crystal ball, but it's about developing what I call timeline intelligence, actively monitoring for those potential risks, and then communicating them before they snowball into full-blown delays.
I like it. So if everyone on the team is in tune with potential impacts, you can get ahead of them, right?
Exactly. It's like having an early warning system for your project.
That's awesome. Now, how do we actually do that? Put this timeline intelligence into practice?
One technique I love is creating regular possibility windows.
Possibility windows.
Yeah, instead of waiting till you're 100% sure about a delay, schedule regular check-ins to discuss potential timeline impacts.
So kind of like, hey, while we're still on track now, there are these factors that could affect the timeline, and we're keeping a close eye on them.
Perfect example. It acknowledges the possibility without causing panic.
Right. Transparency and preparation all rolled into one.
Exactly. And remember, even when things are going smoothly, those regular updates, they build trust. It makes those tougher conversations way easier down the line, like you're making deposits into a trust bank account with your stakeholders.
Okay, up until now, we've been talking a lot about in-person communication. But let's be real, a lot of our work these days happens online. How do we handle these conversations in the digital realm?
That's a great question. Because, digital communication, it's got its own set of rules, right?
Yeah.
You need to remember that different platforms have different, what I call trust coefficients.
Interesting. Trust coefficients.
Yeah, like think about it. An email announcing a delay, that's going to be perceived as way more serious than, say, the same message delivered in a quick chat.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So the medium actually influences the message.
It really does.
Yeah.
And video calls, I find those tend to be better received because they add that human element back in. You can see someone's face, hear their tone. It builds trust.
Totally. There's nothing like actually seeing a person to build that rapport.
Right. For sure. Now, let's get tactical. When it comes to emails, pay close attention to that subject line. You want to avoid anything that sounds too alarmist or negative.
So not urgent, project delay.
Yeah, probably not the best move. Something like timeline update and action plan is much better.
That's way more positive, more solution-oriented.
Exactly. Now, for video calls, remember the 30-second rule. People form their initial emotional response within the first 30 seconds.
First impressions matter, right?
Big time. So what you can do is use visuals. Share your screen, show a nice, clear timeline graphic, helps people grasp the situation quickly, and keeps the focus on the plan, not just the problem.
Ooh, I like that. I'm a visual person, so that would definitely work for me. What else is important for these online delay discussions?
Always follow up with what I call echo documentation. Basically, just reinforce your message across multiple channels. So if you announce a delay on a video call, send a follow-up email summarizing the key points. If you send an email, follow up with a quick chat to confirm they received it.
It's all about clarity, making sure everyone's on the same page.
Exactly. And here's a cool idea. Create a digital delay dashboard.
A what?
A digital delay dashboard. It's a live document accessible to everyone that tracks all timeline adjustments.
Oh, I love that. That's transparency in action.
Right. And to make it even more effective, include little explanations for each change. Why was it necessary? How does it ultimately benefit the project? Suddenly, instead of being this dry, boring thing, it becomes a story of continuous improvement.
Okay, so we've covered digital strategies, but there's something else we need to talk about, something I think gets overlooked a lot. How different people perceive time itself. I mean, what one person considers a slight delay could feel like forever to someone else.
Oh, you've hit on a fascinating point. It's what I call timeline psychology.
Timeline psychology.
Yeah. What might feel like a minor inconvenience to you could be a major crisis for someone else. Different cultures, different personalities, they experience time in vastly different ways.
So how do we navigate those differences?
Well, first, we got to recognize there are different time frequencies at play. Like, to give you a real-world example, I once worked with this Swiss tech company and a Brazilian creative agency on the same project.
Okay, interesting combo.
It was. But you know what? A one-day delay was a complete meltdown for the Swiss team. But the Brazilian team, they saw it as like a normal buffer.
Wow, that's a pretty big difference. How'd you manage that?
Lots of communication and patience. We had to create this shared understanding of what on time meant for each group.
Sounds like a delicate dance.
It was. And that's why it's so important to understand what I call timeline elasticity. Some cultures, time is super rigid. In others, it's more fluid. And if you're not aware of those differences, well, misunderstandings are bound to happen.
So if you're working with a team where time is very structured, you need to be super clear and upfront about deadlines and any changes.
Absolutely. And if you're working with a team that's more laid back, you might need to build in more buffer time.
It's almost like learning a whole new language, but instead of words, it's about understanding different approaches to time itself.
You could say that. The key takeaway is to be sensitive to these nuances, adjust your communication style, and build that understanding with your team.
Okay, so I'm realizing timeline management is about so much more than just dates and deadlines. It's about people, cultures, psychology.
It's about all of that.
Mm.
And when we master these elements, those delay discussions, they become less about delivering bad news and more about building trust, showing leadership, and ultimately getting better outcomes.
All right, so we've covered how to effectively communicate about delays, but how do we shift the conversation from just managing expectations to actually presenting solutions?
That's where we move from managing expectations to orchestrating solutions.
Yeah.
From apology to opportunity.
Love that. Okay, so how do we create this solutions symphony, as our research calls it?
One powerful technique I use is what I call the solution cascade. It's about presenting a series of progressive improvements that will be implemented during that extended timeline.
So instead of just dwelling on what we've lost because of the delay, we highlight what we're going to gain from it.
You got it. Shifting the focus from loss to opportunity.
I like it. Our source actually mentions an exec in Tokyo who did this. Turned a product launch delay into like a celebration of all these new enhanced features they were able to add.
See, that's the power of reframing. She turned a negative into a positive, and I bet everyone was way more receptive because of it.
Definitely. But this approach, it does require some creativity, right?
Oh, for sure. And a good dose of strategic thinking. But to help, we can use what I call the three-tier solution structure. Think of it like the three movements of your solution symphony.
Okay, I'm picturing a grand symphony now. So what are those three tiers?
Tier 1, immediate actions. What are you doing right now to address the delay? Tier 2, progressive improvements. How are you using that extra time to actually make things better? And Tier 3, long-term benefits. How will this make the project stronger in the long run?
I love that structure. Clear, concise, and it shows you've got a plan.
Right. It creates that momentum. And when presented effectively, those three tiers generate what I call solution momentum. And suddenly, you're not apologizing, you're strategizing.
That's exactly what we want. So we've got our solution cascade, our three tiers. What else can we do to make our solution presentation really sing?
Instead of just listing solutions, create what I call benefit chains. Demonstrate how each extra day, each extra week contributes to a stronger outcome.
So for example, you might say, week 1 will focus on enhancing security. Week 2, advanced user testing. Week 3 will really nail down that marketplace differentiation.
Boom. You're painting that picture, showing those tangible benefits.
Love it. I'm actually starting to see how we can turn this negative perception into a positive one.
That's the power of strategic communication. And visuals are super helpful here. Imagine creating a graphic that maps out those benefit chains. It'll make your presentation way more engaging.
Oh yeah, visuals are always a good idea.
Right. A picture's worth 1,000 words, they say. Now, let's talk psychology. Did you know people are actually more likely to respond positively when solutions are presented in groups of three?
Really? Why is that?
There's this thing called the completion pattern. 3 points. It just feels complete to our brains. So instead of offering one solution, present a solution triad. The immediate actions, medium-term improvements, and the long-term strategic advantages.
Ah, I see. It shows you're thinking holistically, which builds confidence.
Exactly. And then there's the stakeholder value matrix. Basically, for each solution, clearly articulate how it benefits each stakeholder group.
So something like, this solution will let our tech team improve quality, our marketing team can promote stronger features, and our clients end up with a more robust product.
You nailed it. Creates a win-win, gets everyone on board.
Definitely. Everyone feels heard, everyone benefits.
Right. And never underestimate the power of choice. Even if you have a preferred solution, presenting a couple of options can really increase acceptance.
Because it gives people a sense of agency, right? They feel more involved in the decision.
Exactly. And it shows you've explored different possibilities.
These strategies are so helpful. I feel much more prepared to handle those tough delay conversations now.
That's what we aim for. But remember, communication is just the beginning. There's a whole lot more to explore when it comes to not just surviving, but actually thriving in the face of delays.
And for that, you'll have to join us for part 2. Welcome back. So we've been talking about how to reframe our thinking about delays, moving from panic to strategic action. Now what?
Well, we've laid the groundwork with communication strategies. But let's dig deeper into the psychology involved. That's where things get really interesting.
Okay, I'm all ears. How can understanding psychology help us navigate these situations more effectively?
It's about leveraging those psychological principles to our advantage. Take, for instance, psychological anchoring.
Okay, anchoring. What's that all about?
It's all about how you frame the delay. Instead of just saying, hey, we're delayed by 2 weeks, you might say, we're investing an additional 2 weeks to guarantee market-leading features.
Ooh, I see. So it's about shifting the focus from the negative, the delay itself, to the positive, the investment, the end result.
Exactly. And by doing that, you're tapping into this powerful psychological principle, loss aversion. Basically, people are way more motivated to avoid losing something than they are to gain something of equal value.
Makes sense, right? Like nobody wants to feel like they're getting less than they bargained for.
Exactly.
Right.
So by framing the delay as an investment, you're minimizing that sense of loss and highlighting the potential gains.
Cheeky. I love it. So what other psychological tricks do we have up our sleeve?
All right, here's another one. It's called future benefit bridging.
Future benefit bridging. Okay, lay it on me.
Essentially, whenever you're discussing a delay, the key is to really draw a clear connection between that adjustment, the delay, and the future benefits. Get people excited about what's coming.
So instead of dwelling on the disappointment, create anticipation for something even better. It's like saying, hey, we had to take a detour, but trust me, the view from the top of this mountain is gonna be amazing.
That's a great analogy. Or let's say you have to push back a product launch. Instead of just saying, sorry, it's delayed a month, you could say, this allows us to incorporate groundbreaking technology that will really give us an edge in the market.
Now that you mention it, I think I've noticed that successful leaders often use this kind of language. They don't just announce delays, they kind of reframe them as stepping stones to something bigger.
Exactly. And this approach is super powerful when you can back it up with evidence. Data, research, customer testimonials, anything concrete that supports your claims.
It's like, don't just take my word for it, here's the proof.
Right. Okay, one more psych principle to add to your toolbox. Anchoring bias.
All right, what is anchoring bias? Fill me in.
It's this tendency we all have to basically latch onto the first piece of information we get and use that to make decisions.
So if you start by highlighting a positive thing, everything else gets filtered through that positive lens.
You got it. So instead of leading with the bad news about the delay, you might start by mentioning a recent win. Maybe a positive customer review, something to set a positive tone.
I see. It's all about priming the pump, setting the stage.
Exactly. That initial impression, it can really influence how people perceive everything else you say.
Okay, this is all making a lot of sense. I'm realizing that it's not just about what you say, it's how you say it.
Exactly. And those psychological nuances, they make a bigger difference than we often realize.
Okay, so we've got our anchoring, future benefit bridging, and loss aversion. What else can we sprinkle in to make these conversations go smoothly?
Well, how about framing?
I've heard of framing before, but I'm not sure I get it in this context.
It's about how you present the information, Right. Instead of saying, we're facing a huge setback, you could say, this presents a unique opportunity to rethink our process and find new ways to innovate.
Ah, so it's about the perspective you choose, the words you use to paint the picture.
You got it. Instead of dwelling on the negative, you're highlighting the potential for growth and improvement.
I like that, turning lemons into lemonade. But it's not just about the words themselves, right? There's got to be more to it.
Oh, for sure. Your tone of voice, your body language, the overall context of the conversation, all that plays a part.
So even if you're saying all the right things, but you sound defeated, people are going to pick up on that.
Absolutely. It's about making sure your verbal and nonverbal communication are sending the same message. A positive, confident, and forward-thinking one.
This is fascinating. I'm starting to see how much psychology is involved in these conversations, even when we don't realize it.
It really is. And the more we understand those principles, the better equipped we'll be to communicate effectively and get through those tough situations.
So we've talked about handling those initial conversations, using psychology to our advantage. But what happens next? How do we keep things moving smoothly after that initial announcement?
That's when the real work begins, right? It's not just about delivering the news well, it's about following through with action and communication. And for that, we need to master what I'll call the trust maintenance trinity.
Trust maintenance trinity. Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me everything.
The first element is progress pulsing. It's about sending out regular updates, showing that things are moving forward, even if it's in small increments.
So even if it's just baby steps, you're showing that you're actively working toward the new deadline.
Exactly. It's like keeping the project's heartbeat steady and visible. Think of those updates as reassuring pulses of progress.
I love that. It's all about communication, keeping people in the loop. So what's the second element of the trinity?
That would be milestone magnification.
Right.
Basically, it's celebrating those small wins along the way.
So instead of just focusing on that big end goal, we find reasons to celebrate the smaller steps that are getting us there.
Right. Celebrating milestones boosts morale. It keeps the team motivated. It's a reminder that even though things are moving a bit slower than planned, we're still making progress.
Okay, I'm sold on that one. What's the third element?
The third and final element of the trust maintenance trinity is future focusing.
I bet this one's all about keeping everyone's eyes on the prize. Real.
You nailed it.
Oh.
It's about reminding everyone why they're putting in that extra effort, what the end goal is. It helps maintain perspective.
So instead of getting lost in the weeds of the delay, we focus on the big picture and the positive outcomes.
Exactly. Maintaining that sense of purpose, even when things get a little bumpy.
This trust maintenance trinity, I love it. It's practical, it's actionable.
Okay, so what else can we do to, I don't know, keep the ship sailing smoothly, even with a delay?
All right, how about this? Proactive progress reporting.
Proactive progress reporting. Sounds like my kind of thing. What's involved?
It's all about taking initiative. Don't wait for people to come to you for updates. Create what I call visibility windows. Visibility windows. What are those?
They're predetermined times when everyone knows a detailed progress report is coming. Creates predictability, transparency, all those good things.
So you might say, every Monday morning, you'll get an email update outlining last week's accomplishments and this week's plan.
Perfect example. It takes the guesswork out of communication.
I can see how that would be a relief for everyone, too, knowing exactly when they're going to get those updates.
Exactly. Takes the pressure off them to constantly be chasing information. Okay, ready to level up our communication strategy even further?
Always. Hit me with it.
Let's talk about the stakeholder engagement cascade.
Stakeholder engagement cascade. Sounds pretty intense.
It's about tailoring your communication to different groups. For each week of the adjusted timeline, you create 3 types of updates: a detailed progress report for your team, a strategic impact update for leadership, and a value-added summary for clients.
So everyone gets the info that's relevant to them, packaged in a way that's easy to understand and act on.
Precisely. It's like a 360-degree communication approach, ensuring everyone's in the loop and feels informed.
I'm loving these techniques. Okay, what else do we need to know?
All right, let's shift from big-picture communication to something more granular. Let's talk micro-commitments.
Micro-commitments. Tell me more.
Instead of just focusing on that final big deadline, break the timeline down into smaller, more frequent check-ins.
So like setting weekly or even daily goals to show progress and get feedback.
Exactly. Gives everyone more frequent reasons to trust you're making progress.
It's like taking a big, scary task and breaking it down into smaller, more manageable bites.
That's a great way to think about it.
Hmm.
All right, last but not least, let's talk about the narrative thread technique.
Ooh, that sounds intriguing, like a storytelling technique.
It is. Basically, it's about crafting a consistent narrative throughout the entire process. Every update, every communication should tie back to that initial solution presentation.
Ah, so it's like we're telling a story about how we're overcoming the delay and how the project is evolving.
Exactly. It creates a sense of continuity, helps people understand the journey, and feel confident in your leadership.
Okay, I am officially a convert. Delays. Bring them on. I feel so much more equipped to handle them now.
That's the spirit. Remember, navigating delays successfully, it can really set you apart in the business world. It's not just about delivering news, it's about maintaining relationships, demonstrating leadership. It's a sign of professional maturity.
I couldn't agree more. And you know what's great about these techniques? It's not just for project management. These are skills you can use in any situation where you need to communicate clearly and find creative solutions.
Absolutely. Valuable skills for anyone who wants to be a better communicator, a better leader.
All right, well, we've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive. What can listeners look forward to in the final part?
In the final part, we'll go beyond just managing delays. We'll talk about how to actually thrive in their wake, turning them into catalysts for growth and innovation.
Ooh, I love it. Can't wait to hear more about that. We'll be back after a quick break.
All right, welcome back for the final part of our deep dive. Delays, delays, delays. We've talked about the psychology of communicating them, building trust with everyone involved.
We've explored those first crucial conversations, keeping things moving smoothly, even when, well, life throws a wrench in the gears.
And honestly, I think one of the biggest takeaways for me has been realizing that delays, as much as we might groan about them, they can actually be opportunities.
100%. And that's exactly the mindset we want to explore in this final part. Not just surviving delays, but actually thriving because of them.
Okay, I'm all in on this thrive mentality. How do we make that happen?
It all starts with what I call the delay disruption mindset.
Delay disruption mindset. Sounds kind of intense. Like, are we talking about creating chaos?
Not exactly. It's more about recognizing the delays. Yeah, they can be frustrating, but they can also be catalysts for positive change. They force us to re-examine our assumptions, challenge our processes, explore new possibilities.
So instead of just scrambling to get back on track, we take a breath, maybe a step back, and ask, is there a better way to do this?
You got it. Using the disruption to our advantage to come up with creative solutions. In fact, our research mentions this project manager in Seattle. She actually created what she called a momentum map to keep stakeholders engaged during a series of delays.
A momentum map? What's that?
It was basically a visual representation of the project's progress, highlighting those key achievements, those milestones, even amidst the delays. It helped maintain a sense of forward movement.
Oh, that's clever. So instead of just focusing on what's not happening, you're highlighting what is happening.
Exactly. It's the delay disruption mindset in action.
So we're talking about resilience, adaptability, the willingness to embrace change.
All of that.
Yeah.
And a big part of this mindset is also about learning from our experiences.
I think that's crucial. Every delay, no matter how much it might make you want to pull your hair out, there's always something to learn from it.
Couldn't agree more. And that brings us to another important strategy, post-delay debriefing.
Debriefing. So we're talking about like having a meeting after the delay to go over what happened.
Exactly. But the focus isn't on blame. It's on growth, improvement, taking the time to reflect on what went well, what could have been handled better, and most importantly, what lessons we can take away.
So it's like a post-mortem, but with a positive spin.
I like that. A positive post-mortem. And one really useful technique to use during these debriefings is the 5 whys analysis.
Oh yeah, the 5 whys. I've heard of that. Isn't that where you ask why 5 times to get to the root cause of a problem?
You got it. And it can be incredibly effective for figuring out what actually contributed to the delay in the first place.
Can you give me an example? Like, how would that work in a delay situation?
Sure. Let's say a delay was caused by a lack of resources. You start by asking, why were there insufficient resources? And maybe the answer is because the initial resource allocation was inadequate. Then you ask, why was the allocation inadequate? And you keep going, asking why at least 5 times.
So you're basically peeling back the layers of the onion, getting to the heart of the issue.
Exactly. And once you identify those root causes, you can actually start developing strategies to prevent similar delays from happening again.
This is making me think about delays in a whole new way, less like roadblocks and more like opportunities to learn and grow.
That's the idea. Remember, delays can actually make us stronger, more efficient, if we approach them with the right mindset.
All right, so we've talked about shifting our perspective, those post-delay debriefings, uncovering those root causes. What's the final piece when it comes to really thriving in a world where delays are, let's face it, practically guaranteed?
The final piece, and I think this is the most important, is building what I call a delay-resilient culture within our organizations.
Delay-resilient culture. That sounds pretty powerful. How do we do that?
It's about moving away from this rigid idea that being on time no matter what is the only measure of success. We need to embrace a more flexible, adaptable approach.
So it's acknowledging that in today's world, things happen. Delays are bound to pop up. The key is to have the tools and strategies in place to handle them effectively.
Exactly. It's about building resilience, agility, a growth mindset into the very DNA of how we work.
Makes sense. So where does this cultural shift begin?
It starts at the top. Leaders, they set the tone. They model that positive, proactive approach. They encourage learning from mistakes, innovation, open communication.
So it's about creating that safe space where people feel comfortable speaking up, sharing ideas, without fear of being blamed if something goes wrong.
Exactly. And when you have that kind of culture, delays, they become less about setbacks and more about opportunities to grow and get better.
This has been an amazing deep dive. Honestly, I feel like I have a whole new toolkit for dealing with delays, and more importantly, a whole new mindset.
That's fantastic to hear. And remember, it's not about wishing delays away. It's about being prepared, knowing how to navigate them, and maybe even use them to our advantage.
Thank you so much for sharing all this wisdom with us today. I know our listeners are going to get a ton of value from this.
It's been my pleasure. Remember, delays are a part of life, and with the right approach, they don't have to derail us from achieving our goals.
That wraps up our deep dive on mastering timeline delays. We hope you've enjoyed it and found it useful. Until next time, remember, embrace the unexpected and keep diving deep.